Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Eric, what's going on, man? How are you?
Oh, the crowd goes nowhere. I'm good, man. It's a beautiful day, making progress, knocking some shit down, having a blast doing it. Couldn't be better.
Well, we are excited to be here with you. We greatly appreciate everyone tuning in and hanging out with us. We are indeed live here on 83weeks.com. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications bell. Our topic today is Kanyon. We are going to be talking about news and notes about what's happening in wrestling right now in 2025. We're going to save that for the end. I guess we should just start at the beginning, Eric. When do you remember Kanyon first being on your radar? Was he a guy that you saw a lot at the power plant, or what was your first impression of Kanyon?
As best as I can recall, because it was a minute ago, I'm pretty sure somehow, some way, Diamond Dallas Page was involved. There was a period in time when I was really looking for, obviously with the whole blood runs cold gimmick, I was looking for unique performers, guys that really did things that we didn't normally see in the ring. And keep in mind, this is before, Lucha became a really hot thing. Pretty sure he came through DDP.
I do want to ask. I understand before he became a full time wrestler, Chris was working as a traveling physical therapist, and I know that had to be a pretty lucrative deal, especially if you're an independent pro wrestler. But I do want to ask, the opportunity to have this sort of dual hat scenario where you've got a full time job and you're pursuing wrestling. That's not something that everybody was afforded the opportunity to do back then, but it feels like he was able to make that work better than most. I knew these days it's not uncommon, but once upon a time, if you were trying to cut your teeth in the wrestling business back in the territory days, you kind of, in order to be taken seriously, you had to be full time, which oftentimes, more often than not, unfortunately, meant starving in a territory here or there. But by this point, when Canyon's coming up, it is becoming more normal for guys to have a quote unquote shoot gig and still wrestle independence. Do you think that transition was all just born as a result of Vince consolidating the company, or consolidating wrestling into one national brand, or why do you think there was such a change with what was normal in wrestling, Eric?
Well, I think, if you look back, and I'm not an expert on this because I really didn't pay much attention to the independent scene until really about 10 years ago is when I first started noticing it, maybe 15. And then the more I was exposed to it by making appearances and things like that, I talked a lot about that in my last book with Guy Evans called Grateful. There was a moment where, the independent scene had been such throughout my entire career. It had been such a, yeah, I know it exists, but yeah, whatever kind of thing. Um, but really over the last 10 years of exposure, do I appreciate what independent wrestling is today, what it's become, continues to become, because it's evolving, it's changing. The people at the top will probably shift positions, quite a few times over the next several years. But overall, it's growing, particularly in Europe. At least it was growing pretty quickly in the UK in particular. But that wasn't the case back in the 90s, at least not to the same degree. Was there independent wrestling? Of course there was, but not at all like there is today because of what you just pointed out. You know, the only real wrestling that existed was WWE primarily in the 90s, and then distant number two being WCW. Beyond that, there was really very few places, limited places to learn the craft or develop the craft before you took a shot at either WCW or WWE. So I don't know the extent that Chris was involved on the indie scene, but certainly I can see why he would have pursued that. He was such a unique individual in terms of his idea of performing. He was really great at selling. And we especially today, right? We talk so much about some of the incredible athleticism that we see, whether it's Osprey or anybody you want to name in WWE or in Lucha. It's those big dynamic moves that people, go into their "this is awesome" chants over, which is great. It's a fun part of what we see today. But what made Chris so special is he could not only be very innovative, and he was a big guy. He was not like a cruiserweight, right? He probably, I'm guessing, solid, legit 225, maybe 230, 6 foot plus, maybe 6'1", 6'2". So it's not like he was, 5'8" and 175 pounds that could fly all over the ring. But yet the way he sold, and even a lot of his offense, was so unique. Not necessarily high flying, but really unique. His offense was fantastic because it was different, but his selling is what made him so valuable. He could really sell.
What's interesting is his beginnings. I think he was originally trained, of course, we're talking about Kanyon, by Bobby Bold Eagle in New York, but he does get further training under the fabulous Moolah when he finds himself both living and working in Columbia, South Carolina. This is unique because I think most everyone listening to this is going to be familiar that, well, Fabulous Moolah trained a who's who of women's professional wrestlers through the years, but it's rare that we hear a male associated with that name. Did you know this Moolah fun fact about Kanyon?
No, this is the first I heard it. That's why I like doing this show, man. I learned some shit. It's awesome.
Hey, we were talking a little bit about his success in real life as a traveling physical therapist. And I guess there was advice that was given to him early on, Eric. And we've talked at times about what an interesting subculture pro wrestling can be at times. But the advice he's given by those in WCW, the elder statesmen, are, hey, I don't know that I would advertise the fact that you're doing really well financially in your real job. You might get heat, brother. I know that that's silly, but that is the way sometimes, wrestlers look at things as, is this guy really committed, or is that sort of thing? Do you remember there being pushback? I mean, whenever we talked to Bruce about Todd Pettengill, for instance, he was a hugely successful radio DJ in the New York market. So he would drive a different luxury vehicle to TV and wear a different gold luxury watch to TV. And I guess other wrestlers and announcers were sort of looking side eyed, like his success intimidated or bothered them. I know that's never been an issue for you, but do you think that was a real concern for Kanyon, that he may have enjoyed success outside of wrestling and that got him heat in wrestling?
Maybe. I mean, it's hard for me to even think that way. It's hard. I can't relate to any of it, but that doesn't mean I don't recognize that way of thinking exists. And it's insecurity, and I think it's true in life, right? I'm not impressed at all by how much money someone has. That doesn't really tell me anything about their character. It tells me they're good at making money, and that is, something that I can admire depending on how they make their money. But I beyond just acknowledging it and being admiration of someone's success, it doesn't really tell you much about their character. It doesn't, just because someone's got a lot of money or is doing better than you are or I am, doesn't mean I'm going to enjoy hanging out with them. So but that's me. But in a professional wrestling, especially in a locker room, on a roster, performers, talent, whether they're actors and actresses, they're wrestlers, they're on Broadway, Disney on Ice skaters, whatever. If you're a performer, you're in a subjective business. It's somebody else's opinion as to how good you are or aren't, right? Sometimes that's manageable or you can track it and gauge it. Sometimes it's just a gut. And because of that, I think performers of all types, but in particular wrestlers, or maybe just because I've been closer to that part of it, are some of the most insecure people you'll ever meet. And it's not because they're weak people necessarily, but they're in an environment that is so subjective and political that you have to be aware of it. And you end up thinking like, oh my gosh, what's this guy doing here? He's making way more money than I am. He doesn't need to be here. He's never paid his dues. Who'd he ever beat? He couldn't lace up Gene Okerlund's boots. I mean, that's like the default go-to mentality of so many people in just about every locker room. Not just about every locker room I've ever been into. There's degrees of it, but it exists. And if it did exist for Kanyon was smart. He was a smart dude. If somebody would have buzzed him on that, you would never even hear about what he was doing offline or outside of wrestling. So I don't know if that was a problem for him or not. I'd like to talk to somebody that knew him really well, which, by the way, I tried really hard to get Raphael Morphy. People that are in the industry pretty much will recognize his name. Raphael's working with us on Real American Freestyle. And when Raphael heard that we were doing this podcast, he texted me early this morning. He said, man, this is crazy. Raphael and Chris grew up together. They lived in the same neighborhood. And they both ended up in the wrestling business, albeit different routes, obviously. Raphael on ticketing and promotion, and Chris clearly as a talent. But they grew up together and knew each other really well. And I invited him on the show this morning to join us and just give us a little snapshot, but he had a previous commitment that he couldn't rearrange. So maybe we'll do a follow-up with Raphael one of these days and talk about Chris and his childhood with someone that actually, grew up with him. That'd be kind of a fun conversation.
They went to those early WrestleManias together too, Eric, like WrestleMania 4 and 5 in Atlantic City. I think Kanyon and Raphael went to those together, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, it was. Hey, and I've heard Raphael talk about it before, like years ago. We had a conversation about it, and I completely forgot about it until this morning.
I do want to ask you a little bit about Memphis. Before we see Kanyon show up on WCW TV, he does appear on USWA TV. Of course, that is the Memphis promotion owned by Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler. And it did feel like there were a handful of WCW, well, we'll call them underneath talent, the developmental talent, like Chip Minton and the Gambler. They both appeared on Memphis TV, but that is not an association that you guys kept for very long. Did that come through Jerry Jarrett, or what was the WCW Memphis relationship like?
There was none.
Okay.
There was no direct conversations or pipeline or talent trade or developmental type of thing at all. Now, that doesn't mean that someone from USWA didn't have a pipeline to either Terry Taylor or Kevin Sullivan or somebody else, within WCW. That could very well have been. But to my knowledge, I don't ever remember hearing any of that coming up even in casual conversation.
I know that we're going to talk about the Kanyon role, specifically, before we're calling him Kanyon or Chris Kanyon, we're going to talk about Mortis and how all that was created. But do you remember ever seeing him before he embraces that character and we see him positioned as a star, when he's just working as more of an enhancement talent? Did he stand out to you? Because as someone who was watching at the time, it did feel like he was taller than a lot of those guys, physically bigger than a lot of those guys. Like, he stood out as an enhancement talent, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, Chris was really gifted physically. I mean, just watch him in the ring. I mean, he had the agility and the coordination and balance and speed of, a 230-pound athletic ballet dancer. He was fluid. Fluid and innovative. I think those are the two best ways to describe his in-ring style. And it was obvious early on. He was just unique enough to really stand out. And you've heard me beat up that thing I say all the time, better than, less than, different than. Chris Kanyon is a classic example of different than. And you just described why, right? Physically, yeah, he was a little bigger. He stood out a little bit more. He was gifted in that respect. And he worked hard at it. It didn't just happen by accident, right? He worked at that. but it was his style in the ring that made him different than. And it wasn't so different that you went, oh, yeah, that's really cool, but I don't see how that fits. Because it's a dance, right? Just because you're amazing at doing a bunch of crazy shit or unique things that we've not seen before doesn't mean your dance partner is going to be able to dance well with you, right? So Chris was able to adapt. He could work with just about anybody and still integrate something different than almost every time. You'd see, there were sometimes little things, but it was always something that made you go, huh, that's pretty cool. But it fit within the context of everything else we were doing.
Something else that will fit into everything else you're doing is Factor. Summer's here. That means more sun, more light, more time to do all the things that make summer so special. And the number one thing you don't want to be doing all summer, spending hours cooking inside. That's where Factor comes in. Factor's chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals are ready in just 2 minutes, taking the hassle out of eating well. Factor meals are going to arrive fresh and ready to eat, perfect for any lifestyle over summer and beyond. With 45 different weekly menu options, you can pick gourmet meals that fit your summer gains and goals. You can choose things like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and more. Factor is going to power your day, sun up to sundown. You've got nutritious breakfasts, on-the-go lunches, premium dinners, guilt-free snacks, and desserts, meaning Factor has your entire day covered. Enjoy more this summer. Get Factor if you want all the flavor and none of the fuss. We've been using Factor here at the Thompson household for quite a while, especially when your schedules get busy. Somebody's traveling. We've got after school activities. We're going to be hitting the road. I mean, even wrestlers these days, they're traveling with all of their meals pre-planned so they can eat on the road. And I'd bet you money, most of those food bags, they're filled with Factor. These guys who are professional athletes, they figured out they want something that's got protein, that fits their lifestyle, that's ready fast, that travels well, and most importantly, that tastes great. Factor checks all those boxes. Go find out what all the boys already know and get started at factormeals.com/83weeks 50 off. Use the code 83weeks 50 off and you're going to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code 83weeks 50 off at factormeals.com/83weeks 50 off for 50% off plus free shipping. That's factormeals.com/83weeks 50 off. So, Eric, let's just start at the beginning. You've got this idea for Blood Runs Cold, and we've covered this in the past in the archives. This is something that was born and created, and the wheels were in motion in advance of the NWO storyline becoming exactly what it became. So let's just give some context for that. We also believe, and this has been the opinion of Tony Schiavone, yourself, me, and everybody who's covered this subject in depth. A few years prior, the blood runs cold angle could have been hugely successful, but when faced with the reality of the NWO angle, it does feel like the timing is off a little bit. But when you were first having that idea, Eric, if you could take yourself to that place mentally, how deep did you think you needed to make this sort of alternate universe? I mean, we know that we're going to get a Glacier character, we're going to get a Mortis character, we're going to get a Wrath character. There's James Vandenberg. We're also going to introduce Ernest Miller at some point. Did you think this would be a collection of, 2 guys, 4 guys, 8 guys? What was the big vision once upon a time for this different universe, if you will?
The macro, at 33,000 feet looking down, I wanted a sufficient number of these characters that would create a licensing and merchandising opportunity. Meaning, I didn't want it to be just one wrestler, for example, Glacier. But although he was the first character, I wanted a cast of characters to increase the opportunity for licensing and merchandising based on the success of this archetype of character in the video games. in the video game industry. So that was like the big idea, if you want to call it a big idea. That was the big idea I had, at least. And two things. One, if that idea would have been executed 18 months prior to the NWL, I think it would have been, it might not have been a home run, but it would have been a double, maybe a triple for sure, in terms of licensing and merchandising. If we would have had a platform like Nitro. So, because we didn't at that time. So I think as long as we're playing hypotheticals here, if Nitro would have happened, say in 1994, 94, had this idea been developed and ready for the big stage where we were doing 5 million, 6 million viewers every Monday night head to head against WWE, I think this idea, the Blood Run Cold's idea, would have been a monster. If the Blood Runs Cold idea, even exactly as it was presented in WCW, would have taken place in WWE, say in 1992, 1993, 1994, it would have printed money. But because of the timing, part of it, obviously the NWO, because that kind of changed the audience's appetite quite a bit, almost overnight. Relatively speaking, it felt like overnight. But had that thing happened, had the Blood Run Cold idea happened in WWE, like I said, 93, 94, it would have made a lot of money because they had the licensing in place. WCW didn't. It took WCW 2 or 3 years after the launch of Nitro, after having defeated WWE for how many weeks in a row at that point. We still didn't have a mature licensing and merchandising infrastructure. It took us to about 1997, really 1998, before that kicked in. And by that time, Blood Runs Cold, the idea was, number one, dated, because the whole Mortal Kombat thing had been around now for a while. It didn't feel new and fresh. And number two, the audience's viewing habits or appetite, I should say, had just changed.
Did you think, though, that this could be its own, like, perhaps video game for WCW? This could be its own series of Halloween costumes and action figures, like a whole new,
Well,
and I know we hate these.
That's licensing and merchandising, right? That was the idea.
Yeah.
I didn't think we'd be producing, we weren't in the business of producing our own video games. That's it's a specialized kind of thing. We didn't have the infrastructure to do that. But I certainly saw video games. I saw apparel, clearly, soft goods, as they refer to it, hard goods in terms of merchandise, whatever that may be, gimmicks, if you will. So yeah, I saw a lot of opportunity for this. It's just the timing sucked.
How big of a contributor to this whole concept was Andre Freitas at AFX Studios?
Major. And he probably doesn't get enough credit, but Andre was a very unique person. He had amazing creative skills and the ability to take an idea that's in his head and turn it into something you can hold in your hand. And his art was pretty cool, very cutting edge. But what made Andre really important and unique in this respect was that, for example, in designing the Blood Runs Cold gimmick for Glacier, it had to be stuff that Glacier could move in. He had to be able to wrestle in that, right? So it's one thing to make something that looks really cool on a piece of paper and maybe even looks cool when it's being presented, but when you put it on a wrestler and say, go out there and give me 16 minutes, it can become a problem. So Andre not only had to create the idea, and all I did was give him the basics. I didn't sit down and make notes on design or anything like that. I said, Andre, here's what I'm looking for. Here's the big picture. Here's some examples of what I'm looking for. And ultimately, this is my goal. call me when you've got something for me to look at. And then he did everything himself. And he worked with the talent. He worked with Ray Lloyd. And so he designed something that Ray Lloyd could identify with and feel good about and felt like it was a part of him and not just the costume he put on every Monday night or whatever. Same thing with Kanyon. He made everything so unique, but he did it by collaborating with the talent. It was a very cool process. I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have, probably because I just didn't really understand it. And I tend to delegate really well. I don't fuck around with stuff I don't know much about. And I knew that Andre did, so I kind of stayed out of it. But I almost wish I would have been a part of that process, only to learn a little bit more about how Andre pulled it all off. But he was a major force.
I do want to ask, were there any color cues given as best you can recall? I bring that up because I know there is the psychology of colors, and from a marketing standpoint and a branding standpoint, colors matter. I mean, we often saw Hulk Hogan, for instance, always in the yellow and red, and that's how he became synonymous with it. So as you're creating these different characters within wrestling, if you're going to have a unique character like this, like a Glacier, it does feel like he needs to have a standardized uniform. It's not like Superman showed up and wore something different every time. We knew what a Superman uniform would look like. So I'm curious, when you're designing Glacier as sort of the central figure, for lack of a better word, he's our Superman, he's our Batman, he's our hero. Okay, now we've got to have the bad guys around him. That does lend itself to, okay, black. But the color green sort of became synonymous with Mortis a little bit. Is that something that would have been influenced by marketing groups or focus groups or something like that at Turner? Or does Andre have the ability to just sort of freestyle some of that and you guys approve it after the fact?
It was really the latter. We had no input. We didn't even really get access to, creative and design. There was no logistic support at all from Turner Broadcasting as a whole. I shouldn't say that. There was some, but it's very, very limited, and certainly not in a creative way. Other than, Brad Siegel really having a big hand in the creation and design of the Open to Nitro, that was an exception. But the rest of it was all Andre. And I would imagine Andre considered some of that. I didn't direct that. There was no process that involved third parties to supply input to any of that kind of psychology behind the color scheme. The only thing I do remember having some participation in was Ray Lloyd's gimmick, the first one. We knew we wanted to go with the ice runs cold. That was the brand, or the branding statement, I should say, more accurately. So the colors were all about ice. Right? That's why the blue and a lot of the snow, and that all of those colors were part of it, resulted in as a result of number of conversations about what that character in specific was going to look like. Going forward from that, it was all Andre.
One thing I do want to ask you about is the idea that Mortis is wearing a mask. Wrath didn't really have a mask. Glacier didn't really have a mask. Mortis does. And I wondered, was that strategic? Because I don't remember you guys selling Mortis masks, but obviously, we're going to learn through Rey Mysterio that, boy, there's a lot of money in selling masks for these major wrestling corporations. But it's interesting, of all three characters, respectfully, with regard to Wrath and Glacier, it does feel like Mortis becomes the cult phenomenon, the cult favorite. And I'm wondering, with the benefit of hindsight, how much of that do you believe is because of the man who portrayed the character? And how much is it the fact that it was different? He did have a mask. It was a cool costume. Like, we all know Kanyon, the great wrestler, but this character, Mortis, it does feel like it has survived and thrived better than the other two. What do you chalk that up to, Eric?
Andre. I mean, the character's name is Mortis, which, takes you right, Day of the Dead type of vibe to it. And Andre was a little dark. His taste artistically was kind of dark. So I would again, I wasn't part of the process. I didn't really, I would check in on it. I'd get updates, sign off on a general direction, but I didn't really dig into Andre's process, what led him to that and why. But I'm 100% convinced that that was just Andre having the ability and the freedom creatively, because I gave it to him, to do what you think looks cool in collaboration with the talent, because they're the ones that have to go out and perform in it. And it just came back. But I think the coolness of that, I don't know where Andre got his inspiration for it. There was no like, okay, should we try a mask on this guy because we think there's licensing and merchandising, because 10 years from now we're going to find out that there's a lot of money in masks. We didn't have that crystal ball. That business wasn't really a big business back then. I didn't have the foresight to see it coming either. So it happened because Andre just thought it was cool as shit, and so did Canyon.
The other thought I was going to ask, and I'm glad you cleared that up, was Canyon had been recently seen on WCW TV as an enhancement talent. So if you're going to put one of these guys under a mask to give them some more credibility, putting him under a hood would give you a fresh coat of paint. And at that point, it had been years since we had seen Ray Lloyd working enhancement talent for WCW. And of course, we'd most recently seen Brian Clark as Adam Bomb on WWF programming. So either way, the result is a cult classic. I mean, even little kids at the time who were watching WCW, you couldn't help but think that this character, this persona that was created was cool. And I get at the time, man, we've got more than we can say grace over in WCW with the success of the NWO. We're going to start Bill Goldberg in 1997 and get him going. And obviously, Bret Hart's going to fall in your lap. You're going to have to create Thunder. Like, things are changing here, and WCW's growing at a breakneck pace. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, all these years later, you got to take a look at what you had Mortis and think, man, in an alternate universe, we have more time to exploit that character, don't you?
Oh, I mean, that's one of those things, and I don't spend it hardly any time unless I'm on this show with you in particular, thinking about what could have been, right? It's
Yeah.
just a waste of time. But, when it comes to someone like Canyon, yeah, I wish that would be fun to do over. I don't wish I could do it over again because, I'm realistic about things. But had I known then what I know now, and had we had probably more time, even though I gave Andre a lot of time to develop this, it was still, it was rushed creatively, not in terms of producing the characters and the gimmicks. I hate to use the word gimmicks. It's so disrespectful in a case like this, because that costuming, the design that went into it, including the lighting packages and everything else, that was an extensive collaborative effort that people worked hard at. But that had, I lost the point I wanted to make there. Let's move on.
Well, I'll tell you this. So you wish that you had a do-over on the Mortis creative. Something you'll never request a do-over on is our friends at Ridge. If you're not familiar, let me just catch you up here. Ridge is the last wallet you'll ever need. Literally, the last wallet you'll ever buy. All the Ridge products come with a lifetime warranty. There's over 50 colors and different styles to choose from, and they're all made with premium materials like aluminum, titanium, or check me out, I've got one in carbon fiber. You can get a unique, slim, modern design that holds up to 12 cards plus all the cash you could need. And you're going to walk around with some peace of mind knowing that all the Ridge wallets have RFID blocking technology. That'll keep you safe from digital pickpocketers. And over 100,000 five-star reviews can't be wrong. They're going to tell you that you're going to love your new slick Ridge wallet. I know I have, and everybody I've put it on has. My guy John at the office has it. Jamie at the office has it. My dad's rocking the Ridge. Everybody I know has a Ridge, and it becomes almost like a cult-like following, because I find myself so happy with the actual wallet itself. I start to say, now what else do they make? because Ridge makes a lot more than just wallets. They've got you with key cases, with suitcases, with rings. You can be coordinated, and it's all got the same slick, durable design. And how about this? Ridge also has free shipping no matter what you pick. They get you a 99-day risk-free trial. And I mentioned it before, a lifetime warranty. And how about this for peace of mind? If you've ever got a little scared because you felt like or worried you were losing your wallet, well, how about the Ridge AirTag attachment? You'll know exactly where your gimmicks are, exactly when you need them. For a limited time, our listeners can get 10% off their Ridge by using our code 83weeks at checkout. Just head on over to ridge.com and use the code 83weeks, and man, you're all set. Now, after you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you.
Hey, Conrad, two things before we go. And I know we got a lot to cover here, but one is I love my Ridge wallet. I never thought I could get excited about a wallet. It's just a thing that you have to have. I have completely changed my opinion of wallets because of Ridge. I'll just look at it every day and I'm amazed. It's comfortable. It's easy to carry. It's not bulky. I get to keep everything I need in it. It's so easy. The cards are easy to access, put back in. It's really, really a cool idea. Hats off to them. Also, I want to point out Adam 453, who's following along live with us, said, I get why Glacier didn't connect with the adult audience at the time, but what about kids? Did that demographic matter at all? That's a really good question, Adam. Thank you for chiming in. Yeah, it mattered. And it was also part of the equation in the idea of developing. There we go. Get you some camera time, Adam. That was also a part of the equation in terms of creating it, because WCW's audience was really old, like really old. Truth be known, the average age of our viewer at the time was probably somewhere in the high 40s, low 50s. TBS as a whole had a very older audience, because of the replays that they were such a prominent part of the brand for such a long time. So the whole blood runs cold idea was also a way to kind of bring up our teens and preteens, because at the time that was a key demo. We all talk about 18 to 49-year-olds in wrestling now because of me, frankly. But at the time, teen and preteen was also a premium target, because the amount of money that demo spends or is spent upon them by mom and dad was significant from an advertiser's point of view. So that great question, Adam, and yes, that was part of the equation to help shore up a non-existent kids audience.
Let's talk a little bit about what's next here for Glacier. By 1998, we know that James Vandenberg is gone. But before we move on, what did you think of the Mortis James Vandenberg pairing? Did you like that as an on-screen presentation?
No, but that had, look, the reason Mortis had a manager is because promos weren't Chris's strong suit. He excelled in everything else. His promo ability was marginal. And it made sense to have somebody speak for him. It made sense to have a manager. I just was never a fan of, what's his name? Vandenberg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't like Father Mitchell.
No, not him personally. I didn't have a feeling one way or the other, but I didn't like his character. I didn't like the way he was presented. Obviously I didn't do anything about it, but I wasn't a fan of it. It was just there. It was necessary.
I'm not asking this to be funny. I realize that it seems like a punchline the way I ask, but the other guy, whenever you had like an oddity type character like this, because I do feel like that's the way he was positioned at times. I'm talking about Kanyon, and Vandenberg, I think, was presented as like a collector of oddities. So when I think about, okay, this guy's sort of a square peg, I think about Jimmy Hart, because Jimmy Hart at times was, of course, a mouthpiece for the Dungeon of Doom. Is if Mortis wasn't repped by James Vandenberg, would Jimmy Hart have been his hypothetical manager, or would it have been someone else?
It had to be somebody else. Jimmy was great at what Jimmy did, but at this time, even Jimmy was already in his 60s and was so branded primarily with Hulk, but a lot of others. It wasn't the right fit. It was bad casting. It has nothing to do with Jimmy's abilities or talent. It had everything to do with the way his brand had been presented. And I don't think it would have been a good fit. I would have not considered that. I would have liked to have had a darker, more mysterious, less over the top. Our characters were over the top enough.
Yes.
I didn't need an over the top announcer. Basically, that's what a manager is. I didn't need an over the top manager. I needed somebody that was mysterious and a little dark, but not over the top. And Vandenberg was over the top, and Jimmy was way over the top. So it would have been bad casting for Jimmy.
I wonder, with the benefit of hindsight, do you think that was a weak spot for WCW? You didn't have enough. You didn't have a strong manager stable.
No. I mean, from a business perspective, you can't keep a stable of guys who are really they only exist to solve a problem. They don't exist because they draw money. Just, I know they're all good. Oh my God, that's not true. Okay. From a business perspective, they're there to plug a hole. If the talent isn't good enough on the mic, okay, we're going to have to spend the extra money to fix that. But to have a stable of those people ready to go, like in case of emergency, just business wise, it wouldn't have made sense. It wasn't a weak spot. It wasn't a blind spot. It was a decision not to become reliant on because otherwise it's too easy. Before you know it, you got half a dozen or a dozen managers on your roster, each making 150 grand a year. Because if they're not worth at least 150 or 200 grand a year, they probably suck. Or suck is hard. They probably just aren't really going to deliver much. They're just going to be there and serve a purpose. And that gets kind of expensive.
Well, I guess the reason I ask is, for a long time, Roman Reigns was kind of the square peg with the WWE universe. He's paired on screen for 5 minutes with Paul Heyman. The bloodline story begins, and they go on a generational run. So I just wondered, because we saw even in the heyday, the golden era of the WWF, Hulk Hogan at different times had a heel factory. So it was Hulk Hogan against someone represented by the Heenan family. So for years and years, it felt like it was, Hogan versus one of Heenan's crew or that sort of thing. So I was just curious if you ever felt like, the lack of a Jim Cornette or the lack of a Paul Heyman or those type characters, because obviously Bobby was with WCW by that point, but no longer in a managerial capacity. But it just didn't feel like in that, we'll call it Nitro era, there was ever a focus on the classic heel manager mouthpieces that we had seen in other territories or even here in WCW in the early 90s.
Yeah, well, a couple things on that. First of all, Paul Heyman, even back then, was, would you like to have 4 or 5 Paul Heymans on your roster? Sure, you would. Go find them. They don't exist. Paul's a very, very unique talent. There's nobody like him. Bobby Heenan, as you pointed out, Bobby didn't want to be a manager. That was in his contract. He didn't want to be in a ring. He didn't even like being near the ring because of his neck issues. So Bobby Heenan wasn't an option. Would have been cool if he would have been, because things would have been way more entertaining if we would have been used Bobby in that role, been able to use Bobby, but we weren't. So we didn't have Paul Heyman. We're going to get Paul Heyman. Same with Jim Cornette. No, I didn't try to get Jim. I'm not sure he would have even taking a phone call at the time. But I don't put Jim quite in the same category as Paul Heyman, but he's in the same zip code for sure. But beyond those two, taking Bobby out of the equation, there just wasn't anybody that was really that good. Certainly not on the level of a Jim Cornette or a Paul Heyman. And if you can't have somebody on that level, it's better not to have somebody. And again, wrestling had changed. And we're talking about now the NWO and we're Nitro, and the reality-based programming is becoming a little bit more dominant on the format. We still had the other stuff, but reality, the audience had developed an appetite for the reality type wrestling that WCW Nitro was the first to really present. That made it even more difficult. So no, I just don't, I think that, yeah, Roman's an exception because Paul's an exception. And that worked. Just about everybody that gets hooked up with Paul Heyman kind of works, but there just wasn't enough of them.
Let's talk a little bit about what Mortis is going to do now that James Vandenberg is out of the picture. Mortis is going to try to join Raven's flock. He's going to get rebuffed, though. So he's going to start trying to make Raven's life a living hell. He's going to go through a litany of different disguises. And eventually, Mortis unmasks and reveals himself and rebrands himself as Chris Kanyon. So I hated to see the demise of the Mortis character. I love the Mortis character. We're clearly going to move on and transition. I know that this is asking you a really deep cut all these years later, but is this something you remember Chris Kanyon being excited about, shedding the mask and the persona and becoming himself, Chris Kanyon? Obviously, that's not his government name, but you know, when you're taking the mask off and you're no longer having a mouthpiece and now you're you, is this exciting or nerve-wracking for a young Chris Kanyon, do you think?
I don't know. My guess would be, because I don't recall having a conversation with Chris about it. It just was one of those things that just kind of evolved. We're thinking about going in this direction. What do you think? Sure, let's try it. But there may have been a lot more to it than that. I just wasn't involved in it or don't remember either way. If I had to guess, I'm feeling Chris was probably excited about it. I'm sure he embraced it because that's the way Chris was. Whether it was something that someone else asked him to do or he decided to do himself, he kind of approached things with the same intensity and commitment. But I'm thinking it's probably something that Chris was excited about because your face is a weapon if you're a performer, if you're a good performer. Your face is one of the best tools in your toolbox if you're a good performer. I talked earlier about Chris's ability to sell. A lot of that has to do with your facial expressions and the way you sell to the camera and the emotion you're able to convey, whether you're on offense or you're on defense. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to take the mask off Ray back in the 90s, is because it allows the audience to connect to the character in a deeper way, even if it's subconsciously, because you could see the pain, you could see the joy, you could see the anger, you can feel it vicariously while you're watching at home or you're in the arena. And obviously, there's an argument for not taking a mask off. I think at that time, because money and merchandising for masks, for WCW at least, was not anything anybody was excited about. So I think, therefore, Chris probably liked it, but it's a guess.
Yeah, I mean, as a reminder, I mean, I think now when we look at this character and the career of Chris Kanyon through the lens of 2025, we can all say, man, that Mortis character was super cool. But let's remind everybody that really the epitome of cool in, say, 97, 98 were guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash. Two of the three of those guys are using their real, actual, like, driver's license names. And the other guy is just this, you know, hillbilly redneck badass who's just drinking beer and kicking people's ass and driving a pickup truck. So reality, more so than fantasy, is what is perceived as being cool here in 97 and 98. But I am curious, when you think back to that time, I mean, we know what did or didn't happen now with the benefit of hindsight. But when we're transitioning away from the masked character and persona of Mortis, and we're going to go towards more like the real life Chris, and we're going to call him Chris Kanyon, did you ever imagine at some point in the future that Chris Kanyon may don the Mortis outfit again, much like we've seen the different split personalities of Finn Balor and the Demon, or the Undertaker, the American Badass versus the Dead Man? Is this something you thought, hey, he could go back to it in the future, much like we saw Cactus Jack sometimes come out of the Mankind character? Or was it more like, no, it's packed away, it's in the rearview mirror, and we're moving on?
I don't think it was either one. I don't think once we kind of, I'll use the term abandoned, but once we stepped in a different direction with Chris Kanyon, there was never a, okay, that's it, it's dead, put it up for sale, put it in the vault. It wasn't that. Had there been an idea that was born out of this new character or storyline where it was like, hey, I got an idea. He's in this situation and he's down 3-1. He's way behind. He needs to make a comeback. He comes back as Mortis to confuse his opponent. Basic stupid storyline. Sure, tag it in. It works. So it wasn't one or the other. I wasn't sitting there going, I see what the Undertaker's doing, so someday we're going to be able to bring this back, or in 6 months, here's what I want to do with this character. It wasn't that. That would be a lie. But I was willing to go back to something that worked if it fit a story.
Well, here's the story now. If you've ever seen a sweaty butt print, and you know you're going to have to sit in that spot after, you may wonder to yourself, I hope that fella knows about Tushy. Or if your manhood right now feels like it's in the panhandle of Florida this time of year, let me just give you some great news. You can refresh yourself daily without jumping in the shower. Washing with the Tushy bidet is going to transform that swamp ass. Yeah, well, you know what we're talking about. Tushy right now is the favorite sponsor on 83 Weeks. I have changed so many lives at my house. I can't tell you how many people come over, they check out my Tushy, and then they want to tell all their friends about my Tushy. I'm talking about the everyday luxury bidet. It's going to help transform your bathroom habits and your bottom health for life. There's a bidet for every biohacking personality, too, like Cloud Plus, that automatically deodorizes the air when you sit down. Eric needs that every now and again. And there's Aura, which automatically opens the seat whenever you enter the bathroom. My wife loves that. But Tushy's also got the elevated bidet collection that's going to nurture your bottom with instant warm water. It never runs cold like Glacier. It's a soothing heated seat, and there's even UV sterilization for next level hygiene. I should mention, all of Tushy's bidets easily attach to your existing toilet. You don't have to run any additional plumbing. That's a big deal. It's easy to use. Everybody can use it. And it's so much more effective than just wiping with toilet paper. You see, Tushy is going to pristinely remove like 99% of the bacteria. And it's also going to protect your natural skin barrier because there's only one natural ingredient. Of course, I'm talking about fresh water. Installation super simple. You can do it in like 10 minutes. And the Tushy bidet gives you the 2-in-1 benefit of reducing irritation and preventing micro tears, but you're also not messing up with toilet paper or damaging wet wipes. I'm talking to you. If you live in a rural area and you're on a septic tank, ask your guy about wet wipes, and man, he's going to tell you you need a Tushy. It's also very easy to use. Did I mention there's a built-in air dryer? Yeah, you can get deodorized, you can get sanitized, you got warm water, you got a heated seat. It'll greet you when you get there. Like, this is hands-free cleaning. Welcome to 2025. By the way, every Hello Tushy bidet comes with a 30-day hassle-free return and a 12-month warranty. This has changed our bathroom life, I mean, this feels like you're living in the future. You're going to wonder why you didn't do this sooner. Go right now and check out Tushy. Keep your swampiest body parts fresh and cool. For a limited time, our listeners can get 10% off their first bidet when you use our code 83 weeks at checkout. That's 10% off your first bidet order at hellotushy.com with the promo code 83 weeks.
No, hey, Dave, could you leave that back up there just for a second? Look at that young lady sitting on the toilet. Look at that face. The thing that makes me chuckle at that is I'm thinking, what did her agent say to her when he called her and said, hey, I've got a gig for you? And she's all excited. She's thinking cover of a magazine. She's thinking some, TV commercial. No, you're going to sit on a toilet like it's the best day of your life. And then the photographer had to get her in the studio and say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to sit down on the toilet. I want you to look up at the sky. I want the happiest look you've ever had on your face. And this poor young girl is sitting on a toilet going, how do I do this? It would have been a fun thing to watch.
HelloTushy.com, and be sure to use that promo code 83 weeks. Hey, Eric, I want to ask you, when it comes to the creativity of pairing a Raven with a Kanyon, is that a Kevin Sullivan call? Would Raven have made that request? What did you think of the Kanyon Raven pairing?
Here's how I bet that happened. I wasn't involved, but I'm almost certain. It was some combination of Kanyon, Raven, Sullivan, having fun, bouncing ideas around a room, and coming up with it. I don't know if it was Raven that suggested it or Kanyon or Kevin Sullivan saw it in his head. That I couldn't tell you. But I do know those three in particular, they thought along the same lines. Like Kevin Sullivan could relate to Raven. I couldn't. I didn't get his character. I mean, I liked Scott Levy as a person. I didn't have a personal problem with Scott Levy. But the character, the kind of grunge, Pearl Jam inspired, miserable, hates the world hates me kind of darkness, I didn't see the money in it. I mean, I saw the value in it because, again, grunge, which is what that whole thing was born out of, despite what anybody wants to admit, been around for a while. And I understood the brand identity that it had and the perceived value that part of pop culture could be. But for me, are they heels? Not really. Because they're kind of bitching about shit that actually should piss people off in a way. Are they baby faces? No. So they were unique in the sense that they were a really well-defined, strong brand, but creatively it was a little difficult to blow it up and create story and the balance of love and hate that any good story needs if it's going to survive. It was really hard.
I do want to ask you about Kanyon behind the scenes. It's around this era where we start hearing that Kanyon is helping more behind the scenes. He's training celebrities for matches. He's doing some stunt coordination for WCW connected movies or Hollywood projects like Arliss. And I've even read that at times he served as almost like a talent scout of sorts. How did he end up in this position? Whose trust had he earned? This feels like someone at a more executive position was a real advocate for Chris. Who was that?
Me. Through and because of the influence of Diamond Dallas Page. Because of the proximity, in a relationship that Paige and I had, if I had an idea, much like you and I do, Conrad, I got an idea. I'm going to call Conrad. We're going to riff on this idea because Conrad always comes up with better ideas or takes a good idea and makes it better, whatever. And that was the kind of relationship I had with regard to wrestling with Paige. He would come to me with ideas a lot. Weekends, Sundays, 2:00 in the morning. Yeah, there was always a constant kind of, not constant isn't fair. There was a regular kind of volley of ideas. And sometimes we were just bounce shit around. He used to have a Mercedes 450 SL convertible. I don't know what year it was. It wasn't a new one, but it was cool as shit. I always loved those cars. Probably a mid 80s at the time. And sometimes on a Saturday, he'd come over to the house and if the weather was nice, he and I would just drive around Atlanta, occasionally have a beverage or two while we're doing it, and just talk wrestling ideas. And Paige, one of the ideas that I talked about with Paige a lot was, and we actually started to pursue this, and it was with Jason Hervey as well. We had it, and I can't remember what it was called, but this is just coming back to me now as we're speaking. But there was an initiative, again, to shore up the youth audience because we were so old. I wanted to come up with something that was really targeted. We were targeting 18 to 49-year-old demos, and we were crushing it, absolutely crushing it. But we still had a weak teen preteen demo. And it's the cumulative number. You know, you're selling ads across the board. You can't just focus on one at the expense of everything else. So it's like, okay, we want to shore up our teens and preteens. How do we do that? Okay. Typically, the audience skews up, the teen audience, the young audience, meaning if you're 12, you want to watch something that involves cool 16-year-olds. If you're 14, you want to see something that involves cool 18 to 20-year-olds, because that's the life you're looking forward to. I know this sounds like psychology, but it kind of is in a way. So knowing that we had a hole in our demos, I was talking to Paige one day, and it's like, what if, you know, and it could have been his idea first. I don't know. I never remember that shit. People keep track of that shit. I don't. Whose idea was it? Fuck, I don't know. But it was in this exchange of, you know, riffing ideas that we came up with. What if we take like 6 or 8 really young, really green wrestlers and put them on a bus and follow them around the country as they participate in these small indie shows? I think we were actually going to produce the indie shows too. These small, not a WCW branded show, but we're going to put these small, independent feeling little shows on, and we were going to shoot reality on the bus. We were going to shoot reality outside of the arena in the independent action, and then, of course, cover the matches. It was going to be its own separate show. I really believed in that idea. It should have worked. It could have worked. It would have worked had I actually pursued it, but we became overwhelmed with other priorities. So the initial part of that process was, let's go find the kids. Let's cast this. We got to populate it with the right type of performers. We wanted guys that were 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 that could do some crazy shit that we weren't seeing on Nitro or Thunder, whatever. That's when, about the time I think Paige said, I got the guy. Chris Kanyon. Chris was already in-house. I already liked Chris. I already had a relationship with Chris. I respected Chris's creativity. We talked a lot about stuff, wrestling stuff, and I liked him, and I trusted him, his instincts. I said, tag him in, let's do it. And Kanyon, and I'm sure Paige was involved because I was busy doing other shit. They took this project on, and there was a wrestling promotion, I think it was in Marietta, Georgia, where these guys would wrestle in a parking lot on Saturday afternoons. And they just started going to some of those places and some of those events and networking within that kind of culture. And that's where Shane Helms came from, where Hurricane came. He was born out of that initiative. You know, 5 Count, you saw it on TBS. That's where that all came from. It came from that initial idea of touring these kids around the country on a bus and shooting a reality show, eventually making them stars vis-a-vis the reality show, and then moving them on over to either Nitro or Thunder. So that was the big schematic. That was the big idea. We started that process, and Chris Kanyon had a lot to do with that. So when it came time for, okay, we got to teach Jay Leno and Eric Bischoff, by the way, how to wrestle. We need to get them through a match. How do we do that? Chris was ideal, and Jay Leno loved working with Chris because Chris could explain things in a way that a non-wrestler could really understand it. and figure out how to do it. He could not only explain it to you, he could teach you in a way that someone that had never even thought about performing in the ring could go, oh, okay, I think I can do that. And then get you through the process. Before you knew it, you're doing things that you would have never believed you could do. Chris is a really, really, really good instructor. He had empathy in the sense that he knew what you were afraid of or what you thought you couldn't do, and he could help you overcome that. That's what made him so good.
Let's talk a little bit about all the folks that DDP inadvertently helped get WCW contracts, because we know that DDP is going to certainly campaign for Kanyon. Canyon's going to prove to be very valuable. And we mentioned that at times he served to be a bit of a talent scout. There was a blip out there, and I guess it was in Canyon's obituary. Dave Meltzer always does a fabulous job in his Wrestling Observer with the obituaries of telling you about someone's entire career. But something he mentioned that I thought I didn't really know a lot about. I guess there was a report that Kanyon, once upon a time, had been tasked with finding quote unquote American cruiserweights for a wrestling meets Power Ranger style show. And I know that he is going to recruit a whole host of talent. But do you remember there being an order from Turner or an idea within WCW that you needed, sort of acrobatic style wrestling for wrestling / Power Ranger presentations?
No, that was just Dave Meltzer butchering the initiative that I just described.
Okay. That makes more sense. So there's a lot of talent that we would see attributed to a referral from Kanyon. There was a June 1999 memo that was made public when WCW was defending themselves against a racial discrimination lawsuit. And these new contracts, these trainee contracts, were revealed as a part of this memo. But these are people who are going to basically just get a jersey to be within the organization of WCW. It's not for major money, but maybe there'll be opportunities in the future. The talent that are attributed as being referred by Kanyon, quote unquote, are Rick Cornell, who we would later see in WCW as Reno, Ryan Forrester, not our comedian buddy, Shane Helms, what's up with that? AJ Styles, Jason Cross, Shannon Moore, Luther Briggs, and Jimmy Yang. Now, there's other names who would also be helped by Kanyon and given credit in the Wrestling Observer newsletter as far as Kanyon helping put in a good word for them in WCW. Names like Jeremy Lopez, Jamie Noble, Shark Boy, Tony Mamaluke, Christian York, and Joey Matthews. Ultimately, a lot of really great talent, in a different era, in a different company. It was said at times that Sean Waltman for Vince McMahon and the World Wrestling Federation, he was like the litmus test. He could get the ring and share the ring with a guy. And when they came back through the curtain in the back, he could look at Vince and say, hey, this guy's got it, or he's not ready. I'm not suggesting that, these are the same performers or serving the same role, but it did feel like Chris Kanyon, man, he had an eye for talent, maybe like Sean Waltman did the WWF. Fair to say?
I think it is. I think it is fair to say, because you look at some of the people on that list, some of them are still in the industry today.
Yeah, AJ Styles, my gosh.
Yeah, so that's kind of a big damn deal. But even Shane Helms has had an amazing career. When it's all said and done, even though Shane Helms never made it to, headlining a pay-per-view necessarily in WCW or WWE, and he worked with The Rock.
Yeah.
He worked with some of the biggest names on the biggest platform in the biggest business wrestling company in the world.
Yeah.
Now he's an agent behind the scenes. And I would imagine if you add up every dollar he's made in professional wrestling, because of Chris Kanyon, largely, he owes a lot to Chris. He's a very, very wealthy. I'm talking about Shane now. He may not be, billionaire wealthy, but he's extremely well off and has had an amazing career. A lot, obviously it has to do with Shane too. I'm not trying to make it all about Chris, but you gotta, for me, I think I have to be honest about what my life would look like if certain people hadn't influenced it dramatically, so that I can be appreciative and remain grateful for the very unique opportunities that I have. And I like to think other people think at least a little bit the same way. And I think Shane Helms owes a lot to Chris Kanyon, as well as a lot of other people on that list.
We are live here with Eric Bischoff talking all things Canyon. We're going to hit some news and notes about modern day wrestling at the end of the show. But if you've got a question, you can drop them now. I do want to take a minute here to answer a question from a wrestling historian. He wants to know, did you prefer Canyon or Mortis? Thanks in advance. With the benefit of hindsight, you got to see both versions. You know, the Mortis character, the dark, brooding character who doesn't speak, and an oddity with a martial arts background, just a pit fighter. And then there's Canyon, the trash talker from New Jersey. What'd you think? Do you have a preference, Eric?
Kanyon.
Yeah.
Kanyon. I mean, the other character served a purpose, or at least we attempted to serve a purpose. So I loved it. And it was an excellent character. It checked every single box we could have hoped to check, except for the part where people really got with it. But the Canyon character I liked because there was more creative flexibility in it. You could do more with a talking character. You could do more with someone who you could identify with and relate to, good or bad. So I like the Canyon character better.
We know that the real life Chris Kanyon is going to get one of the bigger opportunities of his life when he becomes a key figure in the Ready to Rumble movie. I mean, he's really going to be a big part behind the scenes of creating some of these wrestling scenes and bringing them to life and working with the celebrities. And it's interesting because normally that sort of thing went to an LA based wrestler, someone like Chavo Guerrero Jr. in modern times. But back then, you know, because of the WCW affiliation, you got a kid from New Jersey flying from Atlanta here to California to work on this movie. You know, with the benefit of hindsight, you know, do you think Canyon thought this was the time of his life at the time? Did you realize what a big opportunity this was for Canyon? Because it does feel like something he took a lot of pride in after the fact.
He should have, because it was a big opportunity and he appreciated it. I was going through a little bit of shit at that time. I was the one that got that movie made necessarily. I was involved at the very beginning with Lorenzo Di Bonaventura, who is the Warner Brothers executive that made sure that movie got made and distributed. And I had a lot to do with that, the heavy lifting of that in the very beginning. Then I was let go. But by the time I was let go in September of 99, that movie was in process. Fortunately, we had kind of laid the groundwork for Chris and who's going to train who before I left, and it continued. So I didn't have the same relationship to the project, obviously. I was supposed to play myself in that movie. That's the part that pisses me off. It would have been really fun
Yeah.
to do that. Yeah,
So you would have been you instead of Joey Pants playing the
Yeah.
Eric Bischoff character?
Yeah, they
Wow.
had to cast Joey Pants because I was no longer part of Turner. No
Wow.
longer part of WCW. But the idea of using Chris, because we're using our wrestlers, it just made so much sense. And Chris had already established he was so good at it. I mean, we worked with Jay Leno, and there was no better choice. Now, looking back at that now in terms of, wow, what an opportunity. And I almost feel sad even doing this because obviously Chris is no longer with us. But we've seen the success that Chavo Guerrero has had, working for The Rock behind the scenes. He's done a lot of stuff in terms of stunt work and choreography. He's probably the biggest name in that space in Hollywood in professional wrestling, and he's earned it. He's worked hard and done well. Chris would have had a similar opportunity at that time. And that would have opened up so much for Chris outside of wrestling. He could be still doing that today if he was still with us. And I think Chris knew the scope of the opportunity in some ways better than I did because I disconnected from it. But looking back at it, it was a massive opportunity for Chris.
Hey, I do want to ask, when you have to take a look back at unfortunately, a story like Canyons that came to a sad end, I can't help but wonder, he did so well with Ready to Rumble, and all we've ever heard from those he worked with, even on the Hollywood side of things, not just the wrestling side, was how great he was. Like in an alternate universe, don't you think Canyon could have had a successful career in Hollywood as like a stuntman or a coordinator or
No, that's
something
what I
like
mean. That's
that?
what I just mean. I mean, he could, Chris, because number one, he was really likable and he was very relatable. Like you meet Chris, anybody could meet Chris, and you'll be comfortable with him almost instantly. He just had that gift. Some people do, most people don't. He did. And he was incredibly talented on top of it and humble. You take those qualities, if you've got exceptional talent that Hollywood needs, and you're a really easygoing guy that people just immediately take a liking to, and you're really good at it, you could be gold. And I think Chris would have been. I think Chris would have had an entirely different career post WCW because of WCW if he was still with us.
Let's take a break right now and remind you that at True Classic, the mission goes beyond fit and fabric. It's about helping guys show up with confidence and purpose. Their gear is going to fit right, it's going to feel amazing, and it's priced so guys everywhere can step into confidence without stepping out of their budget. But what really sets True Classic apart, it's not just the fit or the fabric, it's the intention behind everything they do. True Classic was built to make an impact, whether it's helping men show up better in their daily lives, giving back to underserved communities, or making people laugh with ads that maybe don't take themselves too seriously. They lead with purpose. I want you to check out True Classic. I think you'll be glad you did. I've been rocking True Classic for a while now. You can really feel the difference the moment you throw one on. It's tailored exactly where you want, relaxed where you need it. There's no bunching, there's no stiff fabric, no BS, just a clean, effortless fit that actually works for real life. So forget overpriced designer brands, ditch the disposable fast fashion. True Classic is built for comfort, built to last, and built to give back. You can grab them right now at Target, Costco, or head on over to trueclassic.com/83weeks and get hooked up today. That's trueclassic.com/83weeks. Hey, let's talk about what's next here for Canyon. We're going to see him become part of the Jersey Triad. I know what you're thinking to yourself. Isn't Canyon from New York? Yes, he is. But hey, we're not going to let one state line get in the way of what is going to be a really great trio from left to right. If you're watching with us on YouTube, it's Bam Bam Bigelow, the Beast from the East, Diamond Dallas Page, the master of the Diamond Cutter, and who better than Canyon to round out this trio? Consistently one of the high points of WCW in 1999. There's a lot of stuff in WCW in 99 that, well, maybe it didn't age that well, but this group really worked. Why do you think this group clicked so well, Eric?
Chemistry, talked about it before. Sometimes you put three people together. It's like Hall, Nash, and Hogan. It was a little different because it was, Hogan was so different than Hall and Nash and had to, kind of become one with them. And he did a great job with that. But, the NWO, Hall, Nash, and Hogan was heavily influenced. The characterization of it, heavily influenced, probably, I'll say 60-40, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, right? They brought the vibe and the attitude. And that chemistry worked. The Jersey Triad, that chemistry was already there. It didn't have to evolve. These guys essentially grew up in the same area. One's Jersey and the other's New York. Okay, you could throw a Frisbee from one to the other. Big damn deal. Same thing. In terms of the way you grew up and the way culture influenced you and things you liked and related to. So the chemistry was baked in with these three just because they're all from the same area at the same time. Also, they just liked each other. There was a real bond between DDP and Kanyon. They were very close friends and worked a lot together on some of the initiatives like the one I described with Kids in a Bus. It turned out to be Power Rangers. What the fuck was that, Dave? I mean, yeah, mighty. But the chemistry was already there with those three, and they all had the same accent. It was not hard to imagine that they were really from Jersey, even though Kanyon was from New York.
We know that WCW is going to get rebooted in April of 2000 as the short-lived Russo / Bischoff combo regime. So that's going to make Kanyon a babyface. He's associated with DDP. But the very next month at Slammiere, that's where we have that triple cage, and there's going to be a crazy stunt. Kanyon's going to come off the top of that cage and go through the entrance ramp. This is the same building where a year prior, of course, we lost Owen Hart. We've recently talked with Jeff about this, and with the benefit of hindsight, I think he probably imagines everybody wishes they had a do-over. What do you remember about Kanyon and his big bump off the top of the cage around the 1 year mark of when Owen fell from the same building?
This is going to be very unpopular, but it didn't really register with me then, nor does it in hindsight. I understand the emotion of it. I'm not saying people shouldn't feel the way they feel, particularly someone like Jeff, who was close to Owen.
Yes.
I get that. I am not at all dismissing that personal connection or the way they feel about this because of that personal connection. It's real and it's honorable. It just doesn't apply to the masses. It didn't apply to the way I was going to conduct business. As long as I was safe, as long as we were doing things that we felt comfortable doing, and we had the right people in place to ensure it. That accident didn't happen on my watch. It didn't happen in WCW's watch. So to change the course of my business, which is doing things that we're comfortable doing that we know are safe, to change the way I'm doing business, we are doing business, to accommodate the feelings of a group of people that feel differently because of their personal relationship. I just didn't make that decision then, and I wouldn't make it now. It's in a way not for people like Jeff. I want to be clear about that. But for the masses who like to chirp up and talk about shit like this, it's their version of virtual signaling. Please look at me, like me, retweet me, post this. That's what 90% of that conversation is. Some of it is legitimate. And I have empathy for those people. And I try to understand that. But it can't alter the way you do business. Are we going to stop NASCAR because somebody died on the track? We finished the race. Right? Most of the time, I guess. I don't know. I don't follow NASCAR well enough to know. But when somebody gets carried off on a football field and you don't know they're dead or alive, does the game stop?
Eric, I appreciate where you're going, bud, but normally in wrestling matches, we don't have people rappelling down from the ceiling. So it's a little disingenuous to make a comparison to a NASCAR race or a football field. This is a stunt show that went wrong, and when now we're in the same building doing another stunt show. My question was really more about, do you remember Kanyon being nervous about or trepidatious about doing a stunt show in the same building when a member of this relatively small little wrestling community had a tragic result with a stunt in the same building a year prior?
No. Now, did he have thoughts or feelings that he didn't express?
Right.
At least to me, maybe. I can't tell you what it was in his mind.
Sure.
But here's why I can tell you that I don't think he did. because if he would have come to me for any reason, whether it was because of what happened a year previous in the same building or because he just didn't feel like it was the right day. If he would have said, I'm not comfortable doing this stunt, we wouldn't have done the stunt.
Right.
So I can't say with authority, I know what Kanyon was thinking that he didn't express, but had he expressed any discomfort, we wouldn't be talking about it.
Let's talk a little bit about what's next for Kanyon here. In the aftermath, we're going to see Kanyon turn on DDP, and we're going to get something that was a real highlight of his career. I enjoyed it. It was fun. Positively Kanyon. So we're going to see DDP's just put a book out called Positively Page, and it's very detailed and meticulously researched. And of course, well, so were his matches. So Kanyon is going to slowly lose his mind on television and become a parody of DDP. He's going to run around giving everybody in sight diamond cutters. This was a real bright spot in WCW in the year 2000. You know, we're not taking ourselves too seriously. We're having entertaining segments. We're pulling it off masterfully. That's what I'm starting to appreciate more than anything else. Kanyon could make almost anything work, whether it was the serious, dark and brooding Mortis or this silly over-the-top Positively Kanyon. I like that we're getting to see his range. What'd you think of this DDP parody?
I don't know if I might not. When did this happen? Do you have a time frame on this?
2000. Yeah.
I definitely wasn't. I don't think I was watching. Maybe I was. Maybe I was there for a minute with Russo. I don't remember. I don't remember this. This is hit me at the first time. It cracks me up. It is so DDP. I promise you, every letter, every comma, every period that went into laying this thing out on paper originated from DDP. What a fantastic way to create entertainment. It's fun, right? It's entertaining. And it's selling DDP's book.
It checks all the boxes.
That's the DDP part right there.
Yes.
DDP is without question vis-a-vis this thing that I completely forgot about, if I ever knew in the first place. Diamond Dallas Page, he is the consummate self-promoter. Now, usually when you call someone a self-promoter, it's almost derogatory. In this case, I mean it as a freaking compliment. This guy has figured out more ways to brand himself than anybody in the business other than maybe Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. He's just bang. But he sued 50 Cent for crying out loud. I mean, he's just a branding machine. And this is a fun way to exploit that and create good television. It's awesome.
To be clear, before you send all your hate tweets in, DDP sued Jay-Z for the diamond
Jay-Z,
cutter.
okay, sorry. Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad because I dig 50 Cent. I think he's a number one, he's a really talented guy, not only as a rapper, but he's doing some great things in television and feature films. And he's a really good businessman. So I'm glad it wasn't him.
I wonder what 50 Cent thinks about Blue Chew. Guys, enter the room dick first. Blue Chew isn't just a tablet. It's a cheat code for your gimmick. Stronger, harder, longer lasting. Like someone gave your downstairs a pep talk and a gym membership. Blue Chew is a brand new chewable that now has better sex for your life. Don't you want better sex for your life? Of course you do. This isn't just a supplement. This is an erection resurrection. Have you ever tried to tuck in a submarine? That's what we're talking about here. Guys, it's not just about performance. It's about your legacy or your third legacy. Give her group chat something to talk about. You know, when you lay it down, they're talking about how it gets up, and nothing makes you more of a legend than a little Blue Chew. Discover your options right now at bluechew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. As always, get your first month of Blue Chew free. Just use the promo code 83 weeks at checkout and pay $5 for shipping. That's it. Join Blue Chew's mission to upgrade humanity one thrust at a time. Head to bluechew.com for details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. Eric, let's talk about one of the more iconic moments in Kanyon's career. Positively Kanyon is going to challenge Buff Bagwell to a Judy Bagwell on a pole match. Now, of course, we know it winds up being Judy on a forklift. But what a fabulous match. What a fabulous moment in WCW history. By the way, there's another moment here that people, I mean, look at this. If you're watching with us on YouTube, the idea that Kanyon is driving a forklift to the ring and Judy Bagwell is on the forklift. God bless that woman. I wish she was still with us just so we could have her do a run in right now. I mean, this right here, Eric, when I think about WCW, I think about Hollywood Hulk Hogan turning his back and telling these fans they can stick it, brother. And then I think about the Shockmaster coming through the wall. But somewhere on that list of Mount Rushmore WCW moments, it might be Judy Bagwell on a pole. Man, Kanyon, dude. He had a lot of big, important moments in Nitro history.
It's just like I was talking about the young lady that was the model sitting on a toilet for Tushy.
Yes.
I'm having a hard time imagining what the conversation was like when Mark Bagwell came home one day and said, "Hey, Mom, pull up a chair.
Got an idea.
I have an idea I want to run by you." And
Can you
then
imagine?
as I'm laughing, because, you know, I got to know Judy a little bit. She was young at heart. Let's put it that way. I could see her going, "What?" You know, I could see her kind of engaging. But at some point, she had to go, "Wait a minute. My crazy son wants me on a forklift? Didn't he break his neck? Does he really love me?" It's insane. I would have just loved a bit of fly on the wall to hear him explaining to his mom what this was going to be, and just to see her reaction. And it could have been exactly the opposite of what I would expect. She could have been like, "Oh, that is awesome. Let's do that, Mark." I mean, I don't know, but it's funny to think about. "Hey, Mom, I got an idea.
I want to mention that we also saw Kanyon in this era. I think it was actually the episode of Thunder where he challenged Judy Bagwell to this match this way. But we're seeing Kanyon running around just hitting diamond cutters on random bystanders.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, which got the diamond cutter over too. So now he's pitching his book and his finish.
He is. So earlier in the day, we even see Kanyon hit a diamond cutter in a tiny corner of the screen. There's a wide shot that you guys are using as like a bumper as you go to a commercial break. And it's almost like a little Easter egg, like a Where's Waldo diamond cutter. I love that Kanyon was so ingrained in the program. It does feel like he had friends in production and all throughout. It's no surprise what a beloved figure he was. We know that the Judy Bagwell on a pole match at New Blood Rising is going to lead to Kanyon disappearing for a few months. That pay-per-view match with Judy Bagwell on a forklift was August of 2000. He's going to come back in February of 01 to finish the DDP feud. You're there, but kind of not really. You're trying to put together the funding to purchase WCW. And of course, we know there's a battle for the plan of, you know, what the new WCW might have looked like. Had you been successful in raising the funding and closing that deal, would Kanyon have been featured in your version of WCW after a takeover?
100%. Not even a thought. In any number of capacities by this point, including creative, because he was a very creative guy. Here's another thing about Chris, and this is another thing that people, if you're I don't care if you think you're a seasoned wrestler, unless you work for WWE and you're listening to this show, take a lesson from Kanyon. Conrad just pointed it out. One of the reasons that Kanyon was such a go-to, in addition to his work in the ring, in addition to his ability to teach and set up matches and lay things out, all the stuff we've been talking about for 1 hour and 34 minutes and 49 seconds. Chris also had knowledge, the instinct to work with, hey, Jackie Crockett, you're running the handheld in this corner right tonight. Hey, in this match, I'm going to try something. I want to give you a heads up. And this is where I'd like you to be. This is where I'm going to be. And you might be able to get a really cool shot. He'd have those conversations. He'd have the conversations with Craig Leathers, the director. He'd have those conversations with the handhelds that were down on the floor. And he worked to the cameras in a way that the audience didn't really recognize, but maximized his TV time. And the reason he got so many opportunities is because he's freaking good at it. You don't want to tell Jackie Crockett, who's running the handheld camera, which is our prime handheld camera, Jackie's was because he was the best at it. You don't want to tell him you're going to do something, set it up, be sure your camera's here. We're ready, be ready for the shot, Jackie, and then do it on the wrong side of the ring. Pisses people off. They really want to, because the cameramen, they want to look good too. They want a pat on the back. They also want the artistic, they'll go, wow, no, but I've never seen anybody get that shot before. So they're vested in doing their job. And if you're a talent and you're helping them look better, they're going to treat you much differently than they treat other people. They'll treat other people the way they'll just do their job, but they'll do more than their job for you. That's one of the reasons why Chris got as many opportunities as he did, is because he was smart enough to collaborate with people that most people wouldn't have collaborated.
Let me ask you, Eric. I know that you weren't involved in WWE management. We do know that Kanyon does join the WWE. He's going to be a part of this WCW/ECW invasion storyline. He doesn't get much, really past that. He's cannon fodder in that. It doesn't feel like he's necessarily positioned for success within the company. And I've heard some people say that maybe that's because his in-ring style wasn't exactly, what WWE was doing at the time. I mean, we know that a lot of people he influenced feel like he was, 10 or 15 years ahead of the curve with his in-ring style. But other people would point out, hey, man, it's really hard to stand out when you've got this glut of new talent. So the WWF has been rocking around here for years successfully, but now they've got all the new WCW talent and the new ECW talent. And oh, by the way, they've still been developing talent in their developmental territories. Is it a case of Kanyon just having bad timing in the WWF? Was his style not the right fit in the WWF? Or was it something else?
Just taking a guess, it should not surprise anybody that I hold Chris in high esteem. I liked Chris a lot. You've just heard quite a bit of what I thought about Chris as a performer and a professional. That being said, having spent a little time in WWE, both as a talent for 3 or 4 years and then 5 minutes as an executive, got a pretty good feel for, generally speaking, the way Vince evaluates talent. And it starts with the first impression. Vince was very visual. So that part of it had to click initially. If somebody's going to keep Vince's attention, he has to see something that makes him go, this could be something to work with. Chris's magic was something that was not necessarily obvious. That's something that you'd feel in a first impression. Chris was very humble, very down to earth, unpretentious, ready to explode on the inside. But on the outside, he was a very humble guy. That's not the kind of personality that necessarily stands out to Vince. And I think Vince Probably because there was a lot of talent and there was a lot of moving pieces with the acquisition. I have no idea what, original ideas or plans were, circulating at the time, but it was a lot. And I would bet that Chris just didn't make the right first impression. He just didn't get Vince's attention. Vince never got an opportunity to see what Chris was capable of. And that's unfortunate. That was WWE's loss, honestly.
There is the unfortunate reality that Chris would find out later in life that he was diagnosed to be bipolar. And we know that he had struggled with that disorder untreated for a long time. And I can't help but wonder, man, if he would have had that information earlier in life, could his enjoyment and quality of life been improved? We also know that he struggled with his sexuality. He was a closeted gay man, and there was an implication in certain circles that when he was released from WWE, that perhaps he was released because he was homosexual. Others would challenge that and say they don't even think it was common knowledge that Chris was homosexual. Do you remember in WCW anyone even knowing that, Eric? Or I mean, I know that sounds silly to even discuss, but was it even a talking point? Do you remember even being discussed? I didn't hear that until he was as a fan until he was out of WWE. But was that knowledge out there in WCW?
No, not, I was pretty close to that group.
Yeah,
And again, keep in mind, I was the boss.
right.
So what people said, even with my close friends, I was still the boss, which still kind of changed the conversation some of the time. So I can't imagine what was or wasn't said, not around me, but I never heard nobody cared. Nobody said anything. If it was known, nobody said anything. I certainly didn't know, nor care.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, great. Thankfully, society has changed. Whereas once upon a time that would have been a talking point, or at least a discussion, or whispers in the locker room, or whatever. In 2025, I don't even think it would make anyone's radar. I mean, it just doesn't matter. But I can't help but wonder, man, about just the mental health and support of Chris. It's obviously a much different circumstance, but JR and I earlier this year had a conversation about Tammy Sitch, and we know that her mental health issues have been addressed now that she's unfortunately in prison. But you can't help but wonder how many lives could have been affected differently had they gotten treatment sooner. So, and maybe it didn't stand out in wrestling, being bipolar. Wrestling's such a weird form of entertainment. It does lend itself to, if you're over the top sometimes, oh, well, it's wrestling, right?
Well, no, I bipolar is, Scott Hall dealt with bipolar issues,
Sure.
and that's not the same thing as, wow, they're just over the top. It's not the same thing at all.
We're going to be taking some questions here from Kanyon. If you've got questions, we want to hear them. We are live here with Eric. Michael Collins says Kanyon had something of a speech impediment. Did this destroy any confidence in him to be a good promo guy and thus a huge star?
Fair observation. Interestingly enough, yes, I noticed it right off the bat. I said earlier on, interviews weren't Kanyon's strong point. Part of that was because Chris was well aware of it. And as a result, promos didn't come naturally out of him. He was aware of it. And like anybody that's aware of something like that, you try to hide it. You try to minimize it. Don't draw attention to it, which is probably why interviews, promos wasn't his strong suit. Not because he didn't have the talent. It's because there was a little bit of a block there, as Chris realized, right? But like everything else, he overcame that in terms of developing in the ring and developing his character. By the time the mask came off, it was no longer a concern of his, and therefore his promos were great. Now I won't say great, to be honest. His promos were no longer a weak spot. They weren't his strongest suit, but it wasn't a flaw in the character. It was fine. That was a big accomplishment. So, yeah, I was aware of it. I noticed it. In the beginning, it held him back. But after a while, it didn't. And that was pretty cool. I didn't really think of it in those terms then, to be fair. But looking back at it now, just as a result of this conversation, that's pretty cool.
We got another question here. I think the Innovator of Offense was a pretty good nickname for Kanyon. Had publicly coined by himself. Did you like this nickname for him? The Innovator of Offense. Of course, this is in response to Tommy Dreamer in ECW being called the Innovator of Violence. Kanyon did have a reputation for a lot of creative offensive combinations. I think he, Rob Van Dam, and Nova were often thought of to be the real innovators in that era. What do you think about that? The Innovator of Offense.
I think it's about perfect. It describes Kanyon well.
Aaron wants to know, how would you or where would you rank Kanyon on the all-time most influential list? When you think about influential wrestlers, I mean, certainly guys like Rey Mysterio belong in that conversation. Do you think Kanyon does as well, Eric?
Yes. Especially if there's like an early innovator award. There's so much has been innovated in the last 10 years, right? I mean, wrestling today, there's a lot of it's still the same, obviously, but there's so much new stuff out there. And it all started somewhere. So much of it started with, the luchadors, the cruiserweight division of Nitro, kind of grew from there. But Kanyon's approach, Kanyon's offense also influenced a lot of people. Probably still does to this day, even though some people don't even realize where it all started from. I definitely, Chris should be on anybody's top 5, top 10 innovator list in the last 30 years.
Really fun question here from Michael. I hope you can give us any context because people have been dying to hear about this for a while. Kanyon was apparently a great help for the ring work depicted on the awful NBC Jesse Ventura made-for-TV movie that WCW was involved in. What are your memories of that fiasco? Do you remember this at all, Eric?
Zero. I'm going to have to dig it up. This is the first I've heard of it. Or if I heard of it, I just forgot about it because I didn't give a shit. But I think I would have remembered this.
Well, something that we're going to be talking about is what's happening this weekend in WWE. Of course, as you and I are talking, Eric, WWE is setting up and about ready to go for WWE SmackDown, which is coming to us from Saudi Arabia. But tomorrow, we've got Night of the Champions. That's going down at 1 o'clock Central, or I'm sorry, 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Central. Sami Zayn and Karrion Kross will hook it up there. Rhea Ripley's involved in a street fight. Jacob Fatu is working with Solo Sikoa for the U.S. title. We've got Jade Cargill and Asuka for the Queen of the Ring finale. We've got Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton for the King of the Ring finale. And then for the Undisputed Championship, something a lot of people thought they'd never see again, it's CM Punk and John Cena. I would say one last time, but this isn't in Boston. It isn't in Chicago. Maybe it happens again in the future. It's certainly happening tomorrow. And in a place CM Punk never thought we would see him wrestle, Saudi Arabia. What do you expect this weekend in Saudi Arabia from WWE, Eric?
Wow, I have not been paying attention. To be honest, been a little busy. But as you just walked me through that card, I'll be watching, or at least taping it, TiVoing it, whatever this is called now. Recording it. There you go. I'll record it because I want to see that. I really, really, really want to see Cody in Orton. I think that's going to be a classic. It has the potential to be a real classic. Cannot wait for that. And obviously Punk Cena, yeah. For a lot of reasons, I'm looking forward to that one. I think it's awesome.
Eric, I want to ask you about the real news today as we're recording. There was a report yesterday, I guess there was video on Thursday of CM Punk walking backstage somewhere in Saudi Arabia, and it looks like he was approached by a young fan, and he perhaps pushed that young fan away. And I know WWE seemingly, I don't know how they felt about that, but they had CM Punk come out today as we've been recording at the press conference there in Saudi Arabia and basically issue an apology for the tweet that he put out 6 years ago. He was a mean tweet aimed at The Miz, and he apologized to a fan in the crowd and the country of Saudi Arabia. A bit of a controversy about CM Punk in Saudi Arabia, given prior tweets and prior positioning. I know you've been critical at different times of CM Punk. Do you have an opinion about this in 2025, Eric?
Kind of respect him for respect him for doing it. That's it. I respect him. That takes a lot. Good for him.
It does take a lot. We'll see what happens tomorrow with him and John Cena in Saudi Arabia. I do want to get your take on the promo that he did, talking about John Cena and CM Punk. They did, I guess, a modern version of the pipe bomb promo. And whenever somebody talks about a big promo in wrestling, of course, they always wind up referring to the Bash at the Beach 1996 with Hulk Hogan. But the pipe bomb from actually on this day 14 years ago, June 27th 2011, that's where Punk sat on the platform, the stage there, and dropped the pipe bomb promo. And this past weekend on USA, we saw John Cena try to recreate that, and I guess it racked up tens of millions of views. We even saw John, quote unquote, break the fourth wall and say hello to Claudio Castagnoli and Nick Nemeth and Matt Cardona. What'd you think of them trying to recreate the pipe bomb and dig into some of this CM Punk, John Cena shared history?
I think the creative calculation is supported by the data that it was a great idea. It's the audience knows you're taking advantage of history and backstory, and with a wink and a nod, the audience likes that kind of stuff. It was a smart move. Smart, creative, and like I say, backed up based on the stats you just read off, backed up with pretty significant data to support the creative.
Well, there's got to be a lot of significant data behind Real American Freestyle. We know their debut show is just a couple of months away in Cleveland, Ohio. Tickets are on sale now, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to update everybody as we start to bring today's episode of 83 Weeks to a close. What's the latest on Real American Freestyle that you could share with everybody, Eric?
Oh, there's not a lot I can share, unfortunately, but I can tell you that there's going to be a lot of news come July 21st. So, we're rolling out some of our social media promotions starting. We've announced signings and things like that, but we're going to start rolling out specific social media campaigns probably Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. Start really building some interest. We're going to continue to build on promotion for the next couple of weeks, and we're going to blow it all out on July 21st. So a lot of stuff going on that I'm really excited about. I'm not like, Carnival Clown, pro wrestling promoter, overhype, but we've made some significant progress that we're very excited to share. And things are going great. Tickets are available at Ticketmaster. We did a soft launch, 10 days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. Make sure, we got a new website. I want to make sure that everything's synced up and working. You can go to realamericanfreestyle.com, see all most recent news, if you will. You can purchase tickets there. You can also go to Ticketmaster and buy tickets. But the real push is going to start July 21st. A lot of good stuff. Very excited about it. We're even working on some of the details for our second show, which is even more exciting for a variety of reasons. So every day I get out of bed. I sent my first email this morning about 5:15 and going at it till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. But every day we're making forward progress. Sometimes it's a couple inches, sometimes it's a couple feet. We haven't had a mile yet, but we're getting close to making some 100-yard gains here pretty quickly, and it's only going to ramp up speed after that. So it's really, I got to tell you, Conrad, I'm having more fun right now, just more fun working on something than I have since early 90s, Nitro. I walked out of Ted's office and he said, go do that. And once the shock wore off and I started doing it, it got to be really fun. It's kind of how I feel right now. Feeling really fun, really, really excited about it.
Go check it out if you haven't already, realamericanfreestyle.com. And as we're winding down today's episode, I do want to put a button on our conversation about Kanyon. But first, I want to remind everybody that, hey, we can help you save money at savewitheric.com. If you're like millions of Americans and you're struggling with credit card debt and you're worried about taking on new debt, I want to challenge you to make your whole life a whole heck of a lot easier. If you see this report from the New York Federal Consumer Credit Panel, it's showing how debt continues to rise. We're talking about an extra $4 trillion since the end of 2019, and that's just in household debt. Let's get out of debt faster, like my man McIntyre. He's a plumber there in South Myrtle and South Carolina. And here's the deal, man. He's got a baby on the way, needed a new car, had to handle all these expenses. How are we going to make all this happen? We hooked him up. We showed him how to use the equity he'd built up. And that way he could go ahead and take care of the new car. He could take care of the other debt. He could skip a couple of house payments. And by the way, when he starts making those payments again, he's going to save over $1,000 a month. He gave himself a huge raise because he spent just a few minutes with us at savewitheric.com. And if you go right now to savewitheric.com, you could be working directly with Eric Bischoff, and he'll run the numbers for you, see how much money you can save for free. There's no cost, there's no obligation. And if Eric Bischoff can't save you money, he won't waste your time. It costs you nothing to look. And when you work with our team at savewitheric.com, you get our 3-year guarantee. You see, all the experts seem to agree that interest rates are going to improve over the next couple of years. But with our 3-year guarantee, you get the peace of mind of knowing you get the best deal for your family right now and start saving money today at savewitheric.com. But if rates improve over the next 3 years, just give us a buzz. We'll get you that lower rate and not charge you a whole new set of closing costs. So you get the peace of mind of saving money right now, but not wasting money later on a second set of closing costs. Find out how much money you could save right now for free at savewitheric.com. NMLS number 2129, equal housing lender, savewitheric.com. Eric, I love talking about Kanyon. I hope that we shared some fun stories and a lot of people learned some new things about him. When you think about his legacy, what do you think Chris Kanyon's legacy in wrestling will be? Will it be Ready to Rumble? Will it be as DDP's friend? Will it be with the tragic end? Will it be the innovative offense? Will it be with Mortis? What will it be?
I think the wrestling fan base, the knowledgeable wrestling fan base, recognize Chris really for his innovation. I mean, as great a character as he was, as great a job as he did with Mortis, as much fun as he was, to watch with the DDP thing that we just covered. He will be best known, and deservedly so. And I think he would appreciate the most the fact that he was such an innovator, and he left a long impression on the business. He's one of the few people that, everybody leaves a little bit of something to the business. Chris left a lot. And I think that's probably, as he's listening to this right now, that's probably what makes him the happiest.
I encourage everybody to go check out some Mortis stuff, watch some of this Canyon stuff. I mean, why not? Let's go find that Thunder where he challenged Judy Bagwell on a forklift. My God. So many great moments for Kanyon. I'm glad we got to spend some time with him today. And I hope that if anybody listening to this is struggling with some of those same mental issues that plagued Chris, hey man, let's seek out that help and go talk to somebody and try to get better together. There's a whole lot of people out there who loved Kanyon, and I wish he knew that before it was too late. Tell the people in your life who you care about, who matter to you, who are important to you, just let them know. Just tell them, you never know what somebody's going through. And I hope that, listening to this, that Eric and I really love spending time with you every week and talking about these old wrestling stories. And our little wrestling community, we like to think it's pretty big, but really in the scheme of things, Eric, it's not that big. And what an impact Chris made on his brief time on earth here. I mean, his legacy and impact still felt today.
Absolutely is. And a lot of love for Chris to this day for that reason.
Stay tuned, boys and girls. Hit the subscribe button. Tell your friends. We'll be live next week right here on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff.